Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Barbera d'Alba Superiore. This particular wine is a 2021 vintage wine and it's from Pira Figli, sometimes also referred to by the winemaker Chiara Boschis. This is a small, family-owned, primarily Barolo producer. Initially, the domain was about 2.5 hectares with a number of plots that were made as single-vineyard Barolos. So they have plots in Cannnubi, they have a plot in San Lorenzo, they also have a plot in Via Nuova. And if I'm reading the information I've got correctly, the fruit for the Barbera d'Alba Superiore they make actually comes from those plots in Cannnubi and San Lorenzo. So presumably from those bits of land with what are called Helvetian soils, Swiss soils, that are less suited for Nebbiolo. So the domain expanded quite a bit in the early part of this century. In 2009, for instance, they bought 4 hectares of vines in Monforte d'Alba, where they've been growing Nebbiolo and Dolcetto, with the idea that the Nebbiolo will eventually go into a Barolo, but that's being made and sold as a Langhe Nebbiolo. Now, Chiara Boschis, the winemaker, took over the estate from her parents, Francisco and Ida, in 2010, although she'd been working alongside them for a couple of decades prior to that, I believe. Also assisting her is her brother Giorgio, and they're the 9th generation of their family to be making wine in Barolo. And I don't know if they're necessarily the 9th generation involved in this domain as it currently exists, but they have a long history of winemaking. Chiara has been one of the early female winemakers in Barolo, and for a long time was about the only female winemaker, I believe. Moving on, the next step in the estate's development was in 2014 when they gained their organic certification, and all their wines have been certified as such subsequently. Their tiny cellars sit on the town square in Barolo. The fruit for these wines is entirely hand-picked, it's crushed, and it goes into stainless steel fermenting tanks for a fair period of maceration. For that reason, temperature is controlled. Sometimes the must has to be warmed up, and other times it has to be cooled just to sort of slow down the fermentation. But there are punch downs and pump overs going on almost daily throughout fermentation. Then the wine is racked, it's lightly pressed, then it undergoes malolactic conversion in the tank. There's no new oak for this, and the wine ages there for 12 months. Once it's been bottled after that year, it then spends a further at least 2 to 3 months in bottle in their cellars prior to release. I think one of the things to note is that Chiara's name appears quite prominently on the label, and that is because there are some other estates using the Pira family name to market their wine. So I think that's done to distinguish their wines from those of those other estates. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? So a Barbera, quite classically, the colour has a slightly purple note. It's quite dark, it's not particularly deep. I would say there's a medium depth there. As I'm swirling it, there actually appears to be a sort of a slight touch of CO2 in there, although that's dissipating very quickly. You know, it's quite obvious that there is that sort of purple hue to the wine. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are quite developed. There's a sort of a forest floor note. There's quite a juicy, almost purple fruit. I think of boysenberries, juicy fruit, mulberries. There's a spicy hint, almost sort of raspberries, loganberry sort of notes. Loganberry actually, quite a good descriptor there for the aromas. There's not really a leafiness, but there is something savoury, something slightly woody, slightly graphite-like on the top of the aromas there. So let's see what it tastes like, shall we? The palate has a very fine structure. It's really quite drying. There's quite a mouth-watering interaction between fresh acidity, drying, bitter, gripping tannins, very fine tannins, creating a really mouth-watering sensation in the front of the mouth, really accentuating the juiciness of the fruit. It really is that sort of juicy mulberries, raspberries, with a sort of a vivid, fresh, red to purple fruit in the front of the mouth there. There are, as I say, the bitter notes, some of that's textural, but there's also a sort of a slightly spicy note to the flavour. It's not particularly cedary oak. We know there's no new oak on this. I would think it's more derived from the pips of the skin. There's a licoricey note as well. There's not quite the sort of the concentrated core of licorice that you'd get with a more powerful, full-bodied wine. This is more medium-bodied. It's got good fresh acidity and this fine structure, but there is that sort of concentrated dark fruit and I suppose the combination of bitterness just at the end there that's providing sort of licoricey anise sort of notes to the finish. At the finish, you've got this freshness continuing, and that's allowing that sort of juicy red fruit to show through again. It's sort of red cherries, red plums, I suppose, towards the end there. It's a little, perhaps it's mellowed a little. It's not quite got the juiciness that there was on the initial attack. The flavours are actually lasting quite well. The structure with its fine notes was seen much more on the mid palate. It's not quite as firm to the finish, and that's allowing the fruit to just open up a little there. I'm sure that given a bit more time, that fruit will open up more at the finish. But for the moment, it's accessible, and I think the combination of very fine, dusty, gripping tannins and a really quite nice acidity will make this quite a good partner for a wide variety of foods. You know, if you've got sauces you need to cut through, if you've got fatty notes in your dish, I think this will work really nicely with those. I don't think it's a wine that needs long aging. It will probably benefit for a couple of years in the cellar. Continue to hold and be very drinkable, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but there's no necessity to age it for. I think there's a good argument for drinking this while it's still young, fresh and vibrant. In terms of its score, I had a look. We don't actually have a specific score for this vintage. However, the aggregated score for the wine overall is comprised of quite a large number of scores, and that is 89 out of 100. And I think given the wine's aging in, there's a certain lack of complexity, and I don't think the wine quite has the depth to readily exceed a score much more than about 90. So I do think that that's a score that's about at the right place. I think I'd be slightly more generous. I think if I was scoring this wine now, I'd probably score it a 90. But I think that's completely in line with those scores. So thank you very much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, we'd love it if you press the like button. That'd be fantastic. If you want to watch more of these tastings, it would be great if you'd sign up and subscribe to our channel. It would be fantastic to have your support. I will leave a link in the notes below so that you can find out where this wine is sold, its pricing, and all the other information that we have on the Wine Searcher website about the wine's background, its price history, the critics' scores, and the like. If you have any comments you want to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. Be interested to hear what you think about the wine, what your experience with Barbera is, for instance, what you think of the wine tastings we're doing, or any other feedback you have like that for us. It'd be fantastic too. Thanks again for joining us. Do please see if you can take some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.